Hi, this is Dan Aykroyd. He's progressive. He's beautiful. He's thoughtful. He's intelligent. He's powerful. He's positive. He is Stephen Cuoco on Power 98.5 Satellite Radio.
You're listening to Power 98.5, powered by United Angels Dream, your number one resource for public relations, entertainment, and multimedia. Contact them today at unitedangelsdream.com.
Empowering listeners from the US to the UK. Live on air with Stephen Cuoco.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, no matter where you are in the world. You are listening to Power 98.5 Satellite Radios, live on air with Stephen Cuoco, and we are also on Biz Talk Radio, biztalkradio.com. All this and more. We've got an exciting lineup today, very much having had looked forward to having Mr. Tim Williams here on Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco. He's a composer. He's part of the music department. He has done films, not only that I enjoy, Guardians of the Galaxy, Pearl, Get Out, and many more. The newest and latest is Mary. I believe that hits, and we've got to pull this back up again. Where do we have it? Yes, number one. Did you pull that up? I know we should just have Tim say it, but I got to do a great introduction for him. Yes, Mary, most watched film in Israel today. And I believe it's number one in Israel. I believe Tim said it's number two in the U.S. We're going to get the exact stats from him. But his work is brilliant. You have to head on over to his Instagram, Timothy Williams Official. Once again, Timothy Williams Official. The behind the scenes video that was just shared that's on his Instagram is extraordinary to be able to see in the studio and to see the people that he's working with. And just, it's remarkable of how they put this all together. Timothy, what an honor. Welcome to Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco on Power 98.5 Satellite Radio and Biz Talk Radio. We have got to dig into your musical brilliance, how you are just an incredible composer. You've got to give us all the details.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Stephen. It's a great honor.
We've got to, if you want to touch on Mary, the latest, huge in Israel, catching up here in the States. I believe it's number one in Israel, number two in the US, correct?
Correct, yeah. And number one in Brazil as well right now. And that it's only been out less than 24 hours, I think. So it's so exciting that it was an incredible project. For those of you who don't know, it's a really interesting take on the story of Mary, and it's done as sort of an epic. Sort of biblical epic thriller, the kind you haven't seen since the 70s. But you have Anthony Hopkins as Herod and Stephanie Nur as Salome. And so it's almost like a Game of Thrones approach to the story. It has just such a great take on the story, and it really tells it from her point of view and all the struggles that she goes through. But it was definitely quite a challenge because the fact that Netflix wanted it to be their big December release on December 6th meant that by the time I came on the project, music's always at the very end. And they'd been filming, they'd done, filming for, I think, about a year or so in Morocco and these different locations to create this incredible visual vista. By the time I got it, I had about 20 days to write it and produce the score for it. It was about 93 minutes of music. So it was definitely, of all the movies I've worked on, one of the most intense schedules. But I was really happy with the way it turned out, and I got to work from that behind the scenes video. You'll see I got to work with some incredible artists. MB Gordy, who does all the percussion, everything from big taikos to hand drums to a lot of the wonderful ethnic percussion that you hear in the movie. Chi Xuan Yang is a erhu player and an electric violinist. So we created a lot of the textures with I wanted the score to feel both ancient and very modern. So I use synths and those kinds of things. And one of the instruments that I don't know that it's been used before, is this electric violin that she plays that can be pitched down in different octaves. She runs it through guitar amps and we record it. So it's just an incredible sounding instrument. You'll see that in the video. And then I worked with this phenomenal vocalist who's mainly known for video games, Julie Elvin. And her voice is quite spectacular and stunning. And I heard her voice on Instagram of all places. And I wrote the main theme for this movie for her voice. And so she did a beautiful job in bringing the theme to life and all the coloring. And then I wanted some ancient instruments, some authentic, like shofar, but also these Roman caryxes, because obviously you see the full might of the Roman Empire. And for those of you who don't know what a caryx is, again, go to Instagram, you can check it out. But it's this massive, it's like a horn, but it goes down and then it goes up almost 10 feet, and it has this big kind of almost like a fish on the end of it. And it was used by the Romans. They would blow it to sort of indicate that their army was on the way. And that was Abraham Cupairo, who is Spanish. So we recorded, and the orchestra itself is the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, which is based in Scotland. So we had many, many people from all over the world contributing their incredible talents to the score. And that for myself as a composer, that's always the best part, is working with incredible artists who bring skill and talent and interesting colors to the score.
How close are you to the actors of any of these films, Tim? How close are you to just absorb and articulate who they are as human beings, as well as the characters they're about to portray? Do you get to be more involved in understanding the influence to put these compositions together? Where do you begin, and how do you comprise of this?
Well, I think the actors are everything, because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is support their performances. For example, when I watched Pearl for the first time with Mia Goth, it was, I personally think she was robbed of an Academy Award for her performance in Pearl. She's so good. She's such a brilliant actor. And, my job is to work out, how do I create a world in which this character, Pearl, can live and create music that's going to capture her heart, her soul, her dreams, her disappointments, her pain, her anger. All of those elements have to be told through music. And Pearl is a really interesting example of how acting and music can go together, because she gave such a stellar performance. And because of the style of the movie, and we wanted to create something that felt very retro, very thrown back to, say, an old Alfred Hitchcock film, musically we wanted to give it that same kind of coloring as well. What was really interesting is there's a lot of music in the film, but the one place where music comes out is in that final speech she gives to her cousin before she axes her to death, where she's pouring her heart and soul out about what a messed up person she is. And that was the one place we pulled music out to really make an impact. But the rest of the movie is sort of this, almost a ballet between her and the music. So the acting is critical. And I don't know, I recently have done a number of films that feature very strong female characters. I just did Your Monster with Melissa Barrera, and again, it's a story of someone really trying to find their voice as a person, someone who's downtrodden, someone who's ill-treated, and it's her trying to find her strength and her voice. And again, this was an amazing opportunity to try to write a theme for her, and it's an interesting mashup of a rom-com horror. For those of you who haven't seen Your Monster, it won Sundance Best Audience Film, and it recently dropped. You can rent it, but Melissa Barrera is phenomenal. But it's a story, again, it's a really funny, sort of quirky story of a girl who falls in love with the monster in her closet, and trying to find music that would encapsulate their romantic story, as well as something that could ultimately embody her rage, the rage that comes at the end of her story. That's the heart and soul of writing music, is to really try to capture the inner voice. You express the inner voice of the acting. So it's hand in glove. One of the things that people sometimes feel is that music can save a bad performance, and I guarantee you it can't. We're only as good as our actors, and if an actor delivers an incredible performance, then you hope you can match it with some really good music.
For those that are tuning in, we've got Timothy Williams. He's a multi-award-winning composer who has written music for some of the most iconic movie scenes in history, including the sunken place in Get Out, the barn door opening in Pearl, and a death of, is it Leonidas? Leonidas.
Yeah, Leonidas
in 300.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. And to just backpedal slightly with you, Tim, Mia Goth, you hit the box nails through the board with one hammer swing. She surprises me, yet I do not use this word loosely, the word never, but she never disappoints. I absolutely enjoy her. And you're right. I mean, she's incredibly phenomenal. I cannot say or maybe speculate she is underrated, but she is stunning in every way.
I remember, I wrote the score for Pearl pretty much in a darkened room. It was during, it was just tail end of COVID. Things were still pretty slow, and my studio was being renovated here in Hollywood. So I rented a space. Funny enough, it was Jimi Hendrix's old studio, and it still looked like it hadn't changed since the days that Jimi Hendrix and the Doors both recorded in the studio. And I rented it for a couple of months while I wrote Pearl, and my studio has got lots of light and is great, but this was like a darkened box. There was no outside light, so I was just focused on Pearl and watching, and I couldn't get over what a performance Mia Goth gave in Pearl. She just created this incredibly complex, three-dimensional character that just broke your heart. And it was as a composer, these types of performances are ones you just dream of getting to score. And again, same with the story, trying to sort of take a beautifully arced story, a beautifully structured story, and then figure out, how do you create a theme? How do you then twist that theme to support the moments of heartbreak, to support the moments of rage? How can you twist the theme to cover every color that the character goes through, and also structure the pacing of the music so that it matches the pacing of a film? This is sort of the behind the scenes work that goes on when you tackle a movie. The film, as I said, the film I'm really excited for people to see next year is a film called Locked, which stars Anthony Hopkins and Bill Skarsgård. And just again, Bill's performance in this is one of those. It's 90% him locked in a car, unable to get out, and the performance he delivers in this film, as well as Anthony Hopkins, is spectacular. And again, to have that opportunity to bring that story to life with music it's the stuff of dreams. It's what you dream of when you're studying music scoring.
What sort of emotional, mental space do you get yourself in before entering the studio or while you're in the studio? How much of flow do you allow to go in and within and around you?
That's a great question. I would be lying if I said that the movies don't impact your space. They do. And I always find that when you're creating music for a film, you inhabit that world, and you definitely, my wife always knows what movie I'm working on, depending on my mood. If it's a comedy, you tend to go around sort of very happy, and obviously, if it's a complex drama, you tend to be in that headspace. You have to sort of match the space of both what you're seeing visually and the acting with the music. So you definitely have to get into that headspace. And sometimes the easiest thing to do is just basically turn off all the lights, put on a candle or something like that, and then just watch the film and sort of really start to feel the space of the film and create space for it in the music. It's surprisingly a very exhausting process, because you're really pouring your heart and soul into trying to create something that matches the space of the film. So, but you do, it's like any other craft. Some days you get a lot done and it just flows, and other days you feel like you're banging your head against the table and nothing's coming and nothing sounds good. So it's the same as any artistic endeavor. You have days that really flow and work well, and other days where you're just pulling your hair out going, why can't I find this?
I gotta ask, and I don't usually have questions prepared, but for you, I really and truly wanted to have something that, I don't know, hopefully moves you and to touch on maybe that someone else hasn't. So here's my one question. Can you describe a moment when you felt deeply connected to a piece of music you were creating, and why?
I think for me, the main title of Pearl is one of the ones that I was very connected to. I'm a huge fan of John Barry, who, for those of you who don't know, wrote a lot of the music for James Bond, all the Bond films, but also wrote the movie music for Out of Africa, Body Heat, Dances with Wolves. And there's just something, I don't know, so powerful about, those movies and the scores that just emotionally connected with me. And Pearl, the main theme for Pearl was definitely one of those moments where I really got to create something that I think was the closest to who I am as a person in terms of what I love, what I admire about it. It was the first thing I wrote for Pearl, and I sent it to the director Ty West and said, what do you think? And he's like, you nailed it. It's this thing of the barn doors opening and just this world, entering this world. And I just wanted a theme that would just capture the yearning of the character Pearl. So you really understood, her dream to be a star, her who she was as a character, and her dream gets completely crushed and broken. And so I just wanted this sort of headspace for her that gave the audience that sense of that yearning to be a star. And another piece of music, really the main titles for Mary, was a similar thing, where I wanted a piece of music that just summed up the character of this young girl, and the strength, her pain, the struggle, a huge struggle that she goes through in her story. And again, it was the same thing musically. I just wanted something that could just express the beauty, but also the pain of what was coming. So those are definitely two pieces that I'm emotionally very attached to, and very happy with how they turned out.
One of the things I would like to know that came to mind as you were sharing, Tim, is how much of responsibility is it of yours in making sure a project, even your own work, is understood And is there a pressure of making sure you're not misunderstood or your work is not misunderstood?
Well, I think the thing about film scoring that is quite humbling is, and you, I think this is a rude awakening for a lot of young composers who come into the business, are imagining that somehow you write in a vacuum, is that a composer for a film score is serving the film. And I think that's one of the hardest things to wrap your head around, because ultimately what you write has to serve the story, has to serve the film. And very often you might write some of my favorite pieces of music that I've written end up on the editing room floor. You go on opening night and you're like, oh, I can't wait for this incredible piece. And suddenly you watch the scene and there's no music in it and they've cut it. And you realize it was the right choice, as heartbreaking as it is. But that's part of the process. So, that's the thing, is I have to work very closely with the director. I have to really try to understand from their perspective what the story is, what emotionally they want to convey, and how to best serve that. With Get Out, one of the things that was really exciting was, again, just trying to create a space for the character to create something that sort of had an iconic feel. And one of the things in that film were the vocals, the sort of the ancient cries that you hear. And in cues like Sunken Place, where he is in that, it was trying to create that combination of terror, but also that cry of the soul, of the pain he was in, and hearing those voices. So again, it always comes back to serving the film, serving the director, and you try within that limited framework, to sort of try and create something that will really be long lasting and impactful, even though it's very specific for that film. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge, is to create something that will continue on as music. But it is definitely a rude awakening, I think, for a lot of people who feel, oh, I'm a great composer, people are going to love my music. And I'm sure people often write great music, but it is always that issue of, how does it serve the film? How does it serve the story? Is it driving the story forward? Is it the best moment for music? And I'm pretty honest with directors. I say silence is often overrated, and I can tell usually if a director's nervous, they'll come in and they'll show me the film, and pretty much almost always my first comment is, there's too much music in this film. If it's a horror film, silence is almost the scariest environment you can be in, because it's people don't like silence. And again, there's a reality to silence. There's a reality. Music can make you feel safe. So that's often one of the key discussions I have with directors early on in the process, is where should music go? What should it be doing? And where does it land? Where is it going? How is it helping tell the arc of the story? So there's a structure to it, there's a pacing to it, and there's a huge intention to why you're writing music and where you're putting it, and getting in and out of those scenes subtly, and supporting the story. So you always have to have that in the back of your mind, no matter how nice your piece of music is.
For those that are listening to Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco on Biz Talk Radio, we have with us today Timothy Williams, who's a multi-award-winning composer who's written music for some of the most iconic movie scenes in history. Earlier work included writing additional music, orchestrating, and conducting films like 300, Watchmen, Super Sucker Punch, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2, Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw, Deadpool 2, and Get Out. I would like to go to Your Monster. In an interview most recently on dreadcentral.com, you had said, I was so thrilled to be involved with this. Caroline Lindy, the director, is an absolute genius, and it's such a great mashup of rom-com with incredible horror elements. It is also such a powerful message about someone learning to speak up for themselves and embrace their way, embrace their discontent, and be able to try and express it rather than being the timid mouse in the corner. That stood out to me, Tim. It felt powerful, something of a message and insight in today's climate of human nature, where people, I find, are, for the most part, so much in their own way that they lose the insight that's needed to be themselves and express who they truly are.
Yeah, it's such a beautifully presented film, and Melissa Barrera is so good in it. But I think the central story is, again, it's like a lot of these films I get called on to do, like Pearl or like Mary, where there are these characters who are put upon and have to find that courage inside of themselves to stand up. And I think that, as you say, it's something that is very important in today's climate. We've seen over the last few years, a lot of the people who typically are voiceless, typically get ignored, able to stand up and talk about some of the suffering and some of the pain that they've been through, and be able to really hold people accountable for some of the stuff that's been done to them. And so I think these themes are very important, and entertainment is often a great mirror to society, where it can show the shortcomings of a society, and it can awaken movements, and it can awaken thoughts in society. And I think it's exciting to see how that, even though it's a rom-com, the message there is very similar to other messages that are coming through in the films today about people finding their voice, being able to stand up and to be able to express themselves, often against very powerful individuals or very powerful people or powerful systems. I don't know, I'm a huge fan of the underdog. I remember when we were working on 300, it was definitely a film that was looked at as an underdog. Same with Guardians of the Galaxy. It was viewed as sort of an underdog film, and I love it when these films really pop and capture something of the zeitgeist that's going on. So I'm a big fan of that. If I have to root for someone, I always root for the underdog.
I agree with you on that one. I do the same exact thing. And not stating that the new film on Netflix, Mary, is an underdog, but as per usual, when we think about media and the subjectiveness of, the audience, I would say even some of the subjectiveness of those who are writing these articles and, sharing their viewpoint or opinion. What are the takeaways that you feel, not only personally, but as well as professionally, because you're a smart professional man who is a professional and award-winning composer? What are the highlights? What are the bullet points of Mary that is so important? Not just the visuals I feel are stunning, but there's something gorgeous about this film. And where can people get out of their way to not dissect this by pulling out a Bible and dissecting it, but look at it from an artistic point of view?
Well, I feel that art is best when it takes chances. When I look at, and again, just to go through those sort of films that I've mentioned, including Get Out and Pearl and these Your Monster and these highlights of things that I've had an opportunity, they're all films that take a chance. They're all films that are not trying to just be a rehash. Oh, I've seen that before. Or it's just something else. They're taking a chance. And the thing with Mary that I loved when I watched it was that it's taking a chance. The idea is, what if we were to do a Game of Thrones or Dune style approach to this well-known story and do a really interesting take on telling the story from Mary's perspective of presenting things. And I think that's one of the things, as you said, is that if you go into it with a sense of, one of the things that I loved about it was there are a lot of well-known elements to the story. There are things that are famous, iconic moments. But when I watched this film, they just snuck up on me and zipped by, and I went, oh my goodness, of course. I got so pulled into the film and thinking of it as a drama that I completely lost the fact that, oh yes, they've just ticked that box. That just happened. Oh yes, they had to go to Bethlehem for a census. Oh yes, they're in a stable. There's no room at the inn. All these things that we all know happened. And the mercilessness of Herod pursuing and basically trying to kill these children. There's a cue in it called Riders of Death, which is so beautifully shot, where these riders are on horseback, the Roman riders, and heading into the village to slaughter. And again, just trying to tell it as a power struggle between what were the giants of the day, the Roman Herod, and this ordinary young woman who got chosen for this incredibly difficult job, and to tell it as a survival story, to tell it as a thriller, I thought was a really interesting take on something that people know well. And to again, I love that idea of taking a chance. And yes, of course, you're going to have millions of critics, and millions of people who love it, millions of people who hate it. But I think you have to do that with art. I think you have to take a chance. You have to be the underdog, and you have to say, look, here's something different. I mean, even Guardians of the Galaxy had that same issue. People were like, why are you doing a Marvel film about a raccoon, a tree? This is weird, and we were like, yeah, but it's fantastic. So, I love those films. I love the films where people take a chance and it pays off. As I said, it's so exciting to see. Number one in Israel, number one in Brazil, number two in the US right now, and who knows what other stats there are. But it's just exciting when people go on that journey with you. They're willing to maybe get rid of some of their preconceptions and biases and just go in and watch it and just enjoy it. Just go in and with no preconceptions of what it should be and just go along for the ride. And I think it pays off. I think it pays dividends.
What I'm excited, thank you, Tim. What I'm excited about with this movie or this film, Mary, and to watch it is I normally stay away from watching films like this, to be quite honest, only because I just understand from a journalist and media perspective what sort of unfortunate repercussions can come from certain people, and forgetting that it's not just about the story. These are jobs. These are people who are making a living, such as yourself and the actors, the film crew who helped put all of this together. That, biologically, I grew up Roman Catholic. My parents who adopted me, I grew up Baptist. And I can honestly say that, in defense, what I've learned through several different religions is that I believe we have the gift of opportunity of interpretation. And that is our right as a human being, as a person of faith, as a Christian, as whatever anyone defines them as and what they believe in, is the free will of interpretation. And anyone who were to challenge by, deeming something as a disgrace or blasphemy or anything else. The question I have for them is, what are you trying to control?
Right.
Why are you trying to
Absolutely.
control it?
Yeah.
And if anyone understands what faith is all about, should know that if we're thinking about blasphemy, you should not be doing that. Because whatever message God is trying to convey, illustrate, speak to that person, that individual, that is that message that's going to help them. It's not going to be for everyone, but don't stand in someone's way of that message.
And I think you're absolutely right with that. I think there's something in it for everybody. I've watched this film probably now, I don't know, 30, 40 times. And every time I watch it, I notice something different in it. Something else in it speaks to me. Different moments in the journey. And they all, with all of these stories, they all relate to a good story will always relate to something that you're going through, will always speak to you somehow about something that's that you're going through in your own life. And hopefully in some ways challenging as well, and I think that's exciting when art can do that, when art can speak to you, can speak to those things that you're struggling with, and give you that courage, give you that hope, give you that insight. So that for me is very exciting. It's one of the things that you get to do in entertainment is reach out to people, and you can't do this with a thin skin. It's a business where no matter what film you do, there's always going to be haters, there's always going to be people who adore it, and you sort of have to just do what you do, and enjoy the craft of creating it. There have been so many films I've worked on that I've felt this is a great film. One film that I particularly adore is a film called The Swearing Jar, which I did during COVID. It's a beautiful little film. It stars Kathleen Turner, who I actually got to meet and spend some time with. She's absolutely amazing. It stars Patrick Adams from Suits. If people have seen Suits, then he's the second lead in it, and Adelaide Clemens. And it's a beautiful film, Canadian film. I think you can find it still on either on Netflix or on Amazon. But you do a film like that, it's touching, it's emotional, it's beautifully filmed, it just is fantastic, and it just doesn't pop. And I remember when I was working on Get Out, I had the same feeling. I was like, oh, this is just a beautiful film, no one's ever going to see it. Thankfully it popped, but there is nothing about working in this industry that you can ever predict how a project is going to be received. And that's just the nature of working. You do exactly the same job for every project you do, regardless of the time frame, regardless of the budget. You do it because you're passionate about your craft. You do it because you're passionate about the art form, and really trying to create some fantastic entertainment for people to watch. And you never know how it's going to do. So that's, again, for people who are getting into the entertainment industry, that's life in the entertainment industry. You have to have a thick skin, and sometimes you get hailed as the hero, and other times you get vilified. So you do your best.
Thank you, Timothy. I appreciate it. That's I would honestly say that's a perfect closing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's a great pleasure to share behind the scenes in scoring films and creating the music for films. It's something I've been very passionate about all my life. I started when I was very young, and I'm just very grateful for the opportunity to work on so many of these beautiful films over the years.
Any closing thoughts, or were those your closing thoughts from earlier?
I think my closing thoughts relate to people who, I know there's a lot of people who love music and love film scores. I invite you to go to Spotify or to my website, which is timothywilliams.net, where you can actually go through and hear different scores that I've written. But I would say, to people who are really interested in getting into the entertainment industry, that you really have to follow your dream. I think that's an important thing, because again, one of the things you find about the industry is there's a lot of great moments and there's a lot of perseverance that's needed. And so I just want to encourage everybody, or anyone who's listening and struggling in the industry, it's amazing how many actors were, like, famous actors today were literally giving up when they got their big job, they got their big breakthrough. And it does take a lot of perseverance. And I just want to encourage people to hang in there and know that if you persevere, that it can happen.
I receive that. I appreciate that. And I'm sure that all of our listeners do as well. Timothy, it is an honor to have you on live on air with Stephen Cuoco on Power 98.5 satellite radio, as well as Biz Talk Radio. Looking forward to having you on again. And are there any golden gems you would like to drop of upcoming projects? Anything personal, a book, a film, a personal project?
Yeah, absolutely. I have 3 films coming out next year that I'm really excited about. One of them is called Mistura. Mistura is an absolutely beautiful film, again, about a very strong woman character played by Barbara Mori. It's set in Peru, and it's about a woman who, it's set in the 60s, again, one of my favorite periods of time to score. And she's left by her husband, and she's trying to survive. And so she ends up becoming a chef, creating this restaurant. And it's a precursor to Nobu. It's all about the Peruvian fusion cuisine, ceviche, that type of thing that we've come to know well. It's an absolutely gorgeous art film that is dropping next year, and again is winning Best Pictures. Obviously, I've mentioned Locked, which is Anthony Hopkins and Bill Skarsgård. That's coming out next year. Again, a phenomenal thriller. And then finally, a film, Eye for an Eye, which is a film created by Leyline Entertainment, who did Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this is a new horror film, but it's, again, a really interesting, quite daring horror film that's done with just the graphics. And again, this is a story of a young woman played by Whitney Peak, going to this very strange town, and Golda Rosheuvel plays one of the, we all know her as Queen Charlotte, but she basically plays one of these two sisters who are her grandmother and her grand aunt, and a very strange goings on sort of mystery in this town, in this kind of swampy location in Florida. Very, very interesting horror film, as I said, by the creators of Everything Everywhere All at Once. So those are the 3 films dropping next year that I'm very excited for people to see when they come.
Well, we've got to have you back on again. We're connected on Instagram. We both have each other's number. Don't hesitate to reach out. Honestly, you've got my complete permission on this, Tim. Hey, Stephen, give me a call, text. This is coming out on whatever date. Here's the red carpet, or whatever it is I need to know. Let's get you back on.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And will there be red carpet events for this? And if so, where?
They usually do red carpet events for each of these projects. I think that's one of my dreams, having done 2 of Anthony Hopkins' films now. I definitely want to meet him.
As you should. As you should. No, seriously, I would love to show up and support you in a project any way that I can. Timothy Williams, everyone, composer, projects such as the most recent Mary on Netflix. I'm excited to see this. And I'm looking forward to seeing it with an open mind. If you don't have an open mind, maybe don't watch it. You know, it won't be in your best interest. But if you do have an open mind, consider the artistic value, the work, the production, the jobs, the effort, the passion that people put into this. You know, there are some people out there in the world that make films just to make films, and it may not be for all the right reasons. But for the most part, when people make a project like this, and many of the projects that Tim has been a part of, you know, Mary, Locked, what else? So we have, I want to pull some other, Your Monster, The Color Purple, Retreat, Founders Day, and so many more. We've got, yes, thank you. 300, Watchmen. I appreciate that. Thank you. Get Out, Hobbs and Shaw, Deadpool 2. I'm happy for you. I hope you and your wife and your family have a wonderful holiday, Tim. I really hope that you take this time, this year end, and reflect on how you've helped these projects, the people that are part of them, and people like myself who are watching them, of what you bring to the feeling and how we're able to encapsulate ourselves to be part of something just so magical. And I appreciate you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
I hope this interview served you well, and I hope you had a great time.
Yeah, fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Really great to chat.
For those that are catching us maybe towards the end of this interview of Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco with multi-award-winning composer Timothy Williams, head on over to his Instagram, Timothy Williams Official. This interview will be available on your favorite podcast platform, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music. Check the Power 98.5 schedule by going to the app or power985.com. This episode will air again. It will also be available on Biz Talk Radio. Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco airs on Biz Talk Radio weekdays 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 5 p.m. Eastern, Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, and Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't watched it yet, Mary is available now, streaming on Netflix. If you have any thoughts, opinions, insight, you want to share a recommendation or more, definitely head on over to the app or go to Power 98.5, power985.com. Click the bottom right-hand messenger icon and send and share your love and support. Once again, Timothy Williams, composer for film and television. Head on over to his Instagram, Timothy Williams Official. Have a safe and most wonderful and prosperous 2024. I hope you're looking forward to 2025 and live in a way that you are going to be most proud of today and every day. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Friend us on your socials and let's connect.